Hi, my name is Malcolm Pryce and I'm the author of The Day Aberystwyth Stood Still, which is part of my Louie Knight detective series. The Day Aberystwyth Stood Still is the sixth in my series of Louie Knight detective novels set in Aberystwyth, featuring Aberystwyth's only private eye. For him, I've imported the traditional 1930s dime thriller, private detective, wisecracking, hard-boiled gumshoe, and let him loose in the small Welsh seaside town of Aberystwyth. Every adventure begins with some weird character turning up in his office with a new case, and this time it begins with a guy called Rasputin, who has a mystery to solve, and the mystery revolves around what is known as the Welsh Roswell. Many people will be familiar with the American Roswell in New Mexico in 1947, when allegedly some flying saucers crashed and the military retrieved saucer wreckage and found some alien bodies in the crashed saucers. And many people probably have seen the autopsy footage on YouTube, or the faked autopsy footage. Fewer people are aware that there was a Welsh Roswell in 1965, which took place in a small mid-Wales town called Ystrad Meirig, when allegedly again a flying saucer crashed and alien occupants were found. This crash took place at the same time that the Coliseum Cinema in Aberystwyth was robbed, and the getaway car ran over one of the aliens who had been wandering lost and forlorn in the countryside with a message of love and galactic fraternity for the mayor of Aberystwyth. And according to the legend, they found three little homunculi in the crashed saucers with the usual alien almond eyes and the domed foreheads and four fingers. And they were taken to the military base in Aberystwyth, where the autopsy was performed. A lot of people are quite skeptical, actually, that this ever took place, but there is validation for this story from an unusual source, namely that after the autopsy, the aliens were kept in the deep freeze at Aberystwyth military base for a while. And then in the 70s, at about the time I went to secondary school, the aliens were passed on to the school canteen in my old school and turned into shepherd's pie. Yes, Louie Knight is the private detective, the only one in Aberystwyth. He's really a modern-day knight in shining armour, a sort of secular knight. The armour's a bit tarnished with rust and dented and covered in seaweed, but it does a job. I think private eyes basically are part of this tradition of knights or supermen or champions of the poor and the oppressed and the weak. And Louis falls into that mould. He's a bit like the guy in the cowboy films whose horse is white or wears a white hat. And his job really is to make everything all right, really, in a world in which there is no justice. And when we're children, we have grown-ups, don't we, to turn to, and they make it all right in the end. And then we leave the family nest, and we realise with horror that there is no justice in the world and nobody to make it right. And that's why we like Superman, I think, and Batman and Private Eyes. He's not an emasculated parody of manhood like Batman, though, in a leotard. He's a real man. He's dark and bitter, and he, like his creator, he drinks to take away the demons. But ultimately, in this terrible, sordid, fallen world, he makes everything all right in the end. Well, I wasn't so much inspired to use Aberystwyth as a setting. It's more the fact that I was commanded to become a chronicler of Aberystwyth. It actually took place before I was born. I was queuing up to get into the womb, and I was taken away to a room where a man, a petty official with filling out papers, he asked me what I wanted to be. He says, "You're going to Earth, 20th century, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I've heard about hippos. They sound like a good job, snoozing in mud all day and doing little else." He said, "There's no way you can be a hippo, it's oversubscribed." And he said, "We've got a job here as a lowly 20th century hack writer with a big nose and spectacles who's going to write about Aberystwyth. Take it or leave it." So I took it. And as I walked out, I turned to him and I said, "Aberystwyth then?" And he said, "Put lots of jokes in it because God likes that." Well, there are two aspects to doing research. One is, at the age of 8, I disguised myself as a citizen of Aberystwyth and went to live amongst them for 8 years, along with my parents. So I ate the same food as them, and I learned to speak like they did and did everything as them. So I perfected the art of passing for a person from Aberystwyth and was able to observe them in total intimacy until eventually the mayor ordained that I be kicked out of the town and put beyond the city walls. So that was the main part of research. And the other part is, because it's a parallel universe which I've created, and I'm not really tied too much to detail and facts, I just make stuff up. Well, I'd invite two crime writers or characters to my dinner party. The first would be Raymond Chandler, obviously the greatest crime writer who ever lived, and it would be my honour to serve him dinner. And the other would be my old school games teacher, who's been the model for my villain through all my books. The villain's called Herod Jenkins. And I think I'd write to my old school games teacher and say, you know, there's been many years of bitterness and bad blood between us, but we're getting old now. Maybe it's time to sort of move on. And so I'd invite him for dinner. And he'd come round, and I think, and he'd say, well, I was moved to tears by the beauty of those sentiments in your letter, Mal. What's for dinner? And I said, you are. And then Raymond Chandler and I would eat his heart.